A single dad gives a stranger his only umbrella, never expects her to return with a chauffeur, a designer dress, and an invitation that will turn his world upside down. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment. Where in the world are you watching from? Rain tapped steadily against the cracked kitchen window as Jessie Carter tied Lily's shoelaces for the second time. The clock on the wall ticked louder than usual, every minute marking just how late they already were. His breath fogged the glass as he glanced out gray skies, puddles gathering fast, and the kind of downpour that could soak a man in seconds. "Dad, my sock's bunched," Lily said, wriggling her small foot in protest. "I got it," Jessie muttered, gently fixing the twisted cotton with fingers still smudged with engine grease from the night before. "There. Perfect." She grinned, her front tooth missing in the middle, and slung her faded pink backpack over her shoulder. Jessie grabbed his old flannel jacket off the hook, checked his wallet, $5 and a gas receipt, and then reached for the umbrella. Just one, and its handle was wrapped in duct tape from the last storm it barely survived. Outside, the cold hit hard. Jessie held the umbrella low over Lily as they hurried to the car, the wind tugging at the fabric like it had something to prove. The old sedan sputtered to life with a groan, wipers struggling to push the water aside fast enough. Jessie turned the heat up, though he knew it would take a good 10 minutes to feel it. "You packed your lunch, right?" he asked, already halfway down the street. "Yup. Turkey sandwich. No mustard." "Gloves?" She held up her hands. "Check." It should have been just another wet morning, just another school drop-off before another long shift at the garage. But traffic was crawling, and Jessie's phone buzzed with a text from his boss. "Try not to be late today." Again. He clenched his jaw and tucked the phone away. As if he wasn't already trying. The city always felt a little meaner in the rain, rare, colder, more indifferent. Jessie squinted through the windshield at the figures on the sidewalk. That's when he saw her. Standing at the corner. No coat, no umbrella, just drenched hair and heels that didn't belong on this side of town. He slowed, blinked. Lily leaned forward. "She looks cold." Jessie pulled over. He didn't know who she was. But some things you didn't overthink. Some things you just did. She stood near the corner of Maple and Fifth, hunched slightly against the downpour, arms wrapped tightly around herself, like she could will the cold away. Her coat, if it could be called that, was thin, more fashion than function, and her sleek black heels were soaked through, making her steps careful and uncertain on the rain-slick sidewalk. Jessie slowed the car, glancing at the woman again. She didn't belong here, not just because she looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine ad for perfume and high-rise apartments, but because she looked lost, not just in direction. In everything. Lily was watching too, quiet now, eyes wide. "She doesn't have an umbrella," she whispered, as if worried the woman might hear her through the rain-streaked window. Jessie's hand hovered over the gear shift. 100 reasons to keep driving filtered through his mind. He was already late. His boss would chew him out again, gas was low, and helping strangers in the city didn't always end the way you'd hope. But there was something in the woman's face, not just cold, not just wet, something deeper. A kind of stillness, like she was holding herself together by sheer force of will. He pulled to the curb. Rolling down the window halfway, he leaned out into the rain. "Hey, need some help?" The woman blinked as if startled out of a trance. She looked at the car, then at Jessie. There was a pause, brief, but heavy. The kind of pause that held a decision. "Toom fine," she said, her voice strained but composed. "You're standing in a flood zone in 4-inch heels," Jessie replied, offering a small smile. "I'm guessing that's not by choice." She almost smiled. Almost. "I was waiting for a car service. It canceled. Apparently, I picked the wrong day to get stranded." Jessie glanced at the passenger seat, this only umbrella still damp and resting across Lily's lap. Without saying anything, he stepped out, pulling it open and walking toward her. He didn't offer it. He just held it over her. For a second, she didn't move. Then her shoulders dropped slightly and her eyes lifted to meet his. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Don't mention it," Jessie replied, already soaked. "You headed somewhere?" She hesitated. Not anymore. The storm rolled on around them, but in that moment, neither of them moved. The rain had picked up, turning from a steady drizzle into a steady sheet of water that blurred the buildings and painted the street in silver. Jesse stood beside the woman, his jacket already clinging to his back, the umbrella shielding just her now. She watched him with a mix of surprise and something else, something uncertain. "You're soaked," she said, as if the words had just occurred to her. "Not the first time," Jessie replied. Glancing back toward the car where Lily waited, her face pressed against the window. "Look, I've got a kid in the car, and we're running late. Take the umbrella." She shook her head instinctively. "I can't." "You can," he said, not unkindly. He pressed the umbrella handle into her hand before she could object again. "It's old, but it'll do the job. But what about you?" she asked. Jessie was already halfway back to the car. "Rain washes off." He didn't look back. He didn't wait for a thank you. He simply opened the door, climbed in, and gave Lily a tired smile. "Let's get you to school, kiddo." Lily stared at the empty seat where the umbrella had been. "You gave it to her?" Jessie nodded, pulling away from the curb. She needed it more. They drove the rest of the way in silence, the heater barely managing to keep the chill at bay. Jessie's flannel shirt clung to him, damp and heavy, and his boots squished with every tap on the brake. By the time they pulled up to Lily's school, his hair was dripping and his jeans felt like they weighed 100 pounds. "You okay, Daddy?" "Yeah," he said with a grin. "Just a little soggy." He watched as she darted up the sidewalk under the school's awning, waving before slipping inside. Then, with a sigh, Jessie turned the car toward the shop. His boss didn't say a word when he walked in soaked to the skin, just gave him a look and handed him a work order. Jessie took it without complaint, rolled up his sleeves, and got to work. Some things in life you didn't do for thanks. You did them because it was right. The bell above the garage door gave its usual rusty jingle as Jessie stepped inside, water trailing behind him like a second shadow. The heat from the overhead space heaters hit him instantly, and with it came the smell of oil, rubber, and burnt coffee comforting in a weird, familiar way. Donnie, the youngest tech on the crew, looked up from under the hood of an old Buick and let out a whistle. Either you took a swim on your way here, or you lost a fight with the weather. Jessie peeled off his soaked flannel and draped it over a stool. "Just giving away fashion tips. Thought I'd try the drowned rat look today." Luis, the lead tech and unofficial shop comedian, leaned on his creeper and grinned. "Well, your hair's doing something special. You going for wind-tossed lumberjack or just forgot what an umbrella is?" Jessie just smirked, shaking out his sleeves as water dripped to the concrete floor. "Gave mine away." That quieted them for a second. "Seriously?" Donnie asked. "To who?" "Stranger on the corner. Soaked. Looked like she got lost between Wall Street and the wrong part of town. Figured she needed it more." Luis raised an eyebrow, grabbing a rag. "You out here saving damsels now?" Jessie shrugged. She looked cold. Donnie chuckled. "Man, you've got more patience than I do. I see someone standing in the rain with heels that high. I assume they've made a series of life choices I can't help with." "Yeah, well," Jessie muttered, pulling on a dry shirt from his locker, "sometimes kindness doesn't need a reason." Back across town, in a bright classroom filled with crayon drawings and backpacks hung in neat rows, Lily was finishing her story for morning share time. "And then," she said, her voice full of pride, "my dad saw a lady who didn't have an umbrella and he gave her R7 though it was raining really, really bad." Miss Avery smiled, kneeling beside her. "That was very kind of your dad." Lily beamed. "He's a real-life hero." And just like that, soaked socks and teasing jokes didn't matter. Because while Jessie changed a tire and sipped stale coffee, he had no idea that his quiet act of kindness was already echoing in ways he couldn't yet see. The afternoon sun broke through the storm clouds, casting streaks of gold across the rain-soaked pavement outside the garage. The air smelled of wet asphalt and warmed engine oil, and Jessie had just finished wrestling a rusted muffler off an old pickup when the low, unmistakable hum of a luxury engine turned heads. The car didn't belong. It was sleek, black, and gleaming like it had never seen a pothole in its life, parked at the curb with the kind of quiet confidence that said someone important was inside. The chrome trim sparkled. Tinted windows reflected the brick building across the street. And then, with practiced ease, the rear door opened. She stepped out, completely dry, not a hair out of place. Gone was the rain-drenched stranger from the morning. In her place stood a woman composed and radiant in a fitted navy coat with matching heels that definitely hadn't touched a sidewalk today. Her eyes scanned the garage until they landed on Jesse, crouched beside a tire rack, still in his grease-stained shirt, arms dusted with brake dust. He stood slowly, wiping his hands on a rag, uncertain whether to be confused or concerned. "Hey," she said, stepping forward, the chauffeur closing the door behind her and remaining by the car like a statue. Jessie blinked. "Hey?" "I wasn't sure I'd find you," she said, a smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "You left before I could return this." She reached into her bag and pulled out something wrapped in a clear plastic sleeve. The umbrella. Cleaned, dried. The fraying duct-taped handle, still there, but now less pitiful, more meaningful. "You tracked me down? For the umbrella?" he asked. "Well, and to say thank you properly," she replied. "You didn't have to stop this morning, but you did, and I was freezing." Jessie glanced behind her at the car again, then back at her. "That kind of ride doesn't usually roll through this neighborhood." She tilted her head. "You could say the same about that kind of kindness." The other mechanics pretended not to stare, but Jessie could feel the eyes. He took the umbrella, still damp with her perfume. "I'm Jessie," he said, finally. She smiled. "Isabel." And just like that, the woman from the rain had a name. The umbrella exchange should have ended there. "Thank you, small talk." Maybe a polite goodbye. But Isabel didn't budge. She stood there on the oil-streaked concrete floor of the garage, surrounded by socket wrenches and the scent of gasoline, looking like she belonged in a glass office with city views, not a corner repair shop in East Briar. Jessie held the umbrella loosely in one hand, still trying to wrap his head around the fact that she'd returned it. Most people would have kept walking. She hadn't. "I was thinking," Isabel began, her tone casual but practiced. "How about dinner? You and your daughter. My treat." Jessie blinked. "Dinner?" She nodded. "It's the least I can do, really. You gave up your umbrella, probably caught a cold in the process, and didn't ask for anything in return." He glanced around, suddenly aware of the quiet behind him. Luis and Donnie had both conveniently found reasons to linger nearby, pretending to study a tire rotation chart with exaggerated focus. "You don't have to do that," Jessie said, scratching the back of his neck. "I didn't help you for, anything." "I know," Isabel replied softly. "That's exactly why I want to." Her voice was different now, less polished, real. And for a moment, Jessie could see the same woman he'd found standing in the rain, shivering, uncertain, and surprisingly human. Still, the thought of dinner with her made him hesitate. Not because he didn't want to, but because it felt like something from someone else's life. "I don't really do fancy," he said, offering a half-smile. "Our idea of a night out is usually frozen pizza and cartoons." Isabel laughed, and it wasn't décolleté, was full, warm, unexpected. "I'm not asking for tuxedos and crystal glasses, just food, maybe a little conversation. I'd love to meet your daughter." He looked at her for a long moment. And then, despite everything telling him this wasn't his world, he found himself nodding. "All right," he said. "Dinner." Isabel's smile lit up her entire face. "Great. I'll have a driver pick you up tomorrow evening." As she stepped back into her car, Jessie stood there, still holding the umbrella, heart thudding with something unfamiliar, excitement, and maybe just a little bit of trouble. The next day rolled in with cold air and low clouds, but the forecast at Jessie's place called for chaos. He just finished patching a slow leak on an old Ford when his phone buzzed with a text from an unfamiliar number. "Driver will arrive at 6 p.m. sharp. Hope you don't mind, but I've sent someone by to help with outfits. Isabel." He read it twice, then stared at the screen like it might explain itself. Outfits? Help? What did that even mean? By 4 o'clock, a Silvertown car pulled up in front of his modest duplex, and out stepped a woman in all black, sleek, confident, and rolling a garment bag that looked like it cost more than Jesse's monthly rent. "Mr. Carter?" she asked, her voice clipped and efficient. Yeah," Jesse replied, still wearing his grease-stained shop tee and holding a can of root beer. "I'm Nadia. Isabel sent me to help prepare you and your daughter for tonight. May I come in?" Jesse hesitated, then stepped aside, motioning to the living room cluttered with crayons, half-folded laundry, and a dog-eared cookbook on the coffee table. "Sure, but just so we're clear, I don't wear anything that needs cufflinks." Nadia smiled faintly. "You won't need them." Lily came bounding in from the hallway, socks sliding across the floor. "Dad, who's the fancy lady?" "This is wardrobe reinforcements," Jesse muttered. Nadia crouched, her tone immediately softening. "And you must be Lily. I brought something special for you." From the second she unzipped the garment bags, it became obvious this wasn't just about being presentable. Jesse's outfit was a tailored charcoal blazer, crisp button-down, and dark jeans that somehow fit him like they were made yesterday. Lily's dress was pale blue, with tiny embroidered stars on the hemline, and lovely, with matching shoes and a hair ribbon. Lily twirled in front of the mirror, beaming. "I look like a princess." Jesse ran a hand through his hair, staring at his reflection. It wasn't just the clothes. It was the implication behind them. This wasn't a thank-you dinner anymore. Isabel wasn't just someone grateful. And Jesse was starting to realize whatever this was, it was bigger than he'd expected. The Carlton loomed like something out of a movie, glass and gold and quiet opulence that didn't need to announce itself. The kind of place Jesse had driven past a dozen times but never once imagined stepping inside. The town car pulled up under the grand entrance, its lights reflecting off the polished stone. A doorman in a dark uniform opened their door with a practiced smile. Jesse stepped out first, adjusting the collar of the blazer he still wasn't convinced belonged to him. Then came Lily, her hand in his, practically vibrating with excitement. "Dad," she whispered, eyes wide as they looked up at the chandelier glittering above the entrance. "This place has a carpet outside." He chuckled under his breath. "Don't get used to it, kid." Inside, the restaurant was bathed in warm golden light. Soft jazz played in the background, the clink of crystal and quiet conversation filling the air. Tables were draped in white linen, waiters in black moved like they were gliding. Jesse swallowed hard and followed the host, feeling every pair of eyes turnsome, politely curious, others less so. And then, there she was. Isabel stood as they approached, dressed in a deep emerald gown that shimmered just enough under the light, elegant without trying. She smiled at Lily first, then at Jesse, and it did something strange to his chest. "You both look incredible," she said genuinely. Lily beamed. "I got a twirly dress." Jesse rubbed the back of his neck. "Thanks to your stylist. I haven't worn something this clean since, maybe ever." They sat, and the menus were presented like works of art. Jesse didn't recognize half the dishes, so he followed Lily's lead who, without hesitation, ordered whatever has the most cheese. Isabel laughed, charmed. Conversation flowed easier than Jesse expected. Isabel asked about Lily's school, Jesse's work, and even laughed when he described the stubborn transmission he spent the afternoon wrangling. But beneath it all, he still felt out of place like a guy playing dress-up in someone else's story. The wine was poured, the food arrived small portions, artfully arranged, and Lily declared her dessert fancier than her birthday. And for a moment, as Isabel laughed at something Lily said, and Jesse caught himself smiling without thinking, he forgot to feel uncomfortable. He didn't belong here. Not really. But somehow, for tonight, He did. The drive home felt quieter than Jesse expected. Though Lily talked the whole way, rattling off details about the chandelier, the dessert, the piano player in the corner who winked at her during dinner. He smiled and nodded, but his mind was still sitting across that linen-draped table, watching Isabel laugh as if the whole world wasn't spinning too fast. By the time they pulled into their driveway, Lily was fast asleep, her blue dress bunched under her coat, head resting against Jesse's arm. He carried her inside carefully, tucked her into bed without waking her, then returned to the living room where the silence settled deep. He sat on the couch, blazer still on, tie loosened, staring at nothing, until curiosity got the better of him. Pulling out his phone, he typed her name, Isabel. He wasn't sure why he hadn't asked her last name sooner. A quick search filled in the blanks. Isabel Moreau, CEO of a luxury design and manufacturing company, Moreau Automotive Innovations. A name he'd seen stamped discreetly on high-end concept cars and European prototypes, never thinking it belonged to a person. Billionaire. Investor. Quiet philanthropist. The kind of woman whose name appeared in headlines next to words like acquisition and tech summit keynote. Jesse leaned back, the phone screen glowing in his hand like a confession. She wasn't just well off. She was empire-level wealthy. No wonder the restaurant staff had treated her like royalty. No wonder the driver, the stylist, the designer clothes. It all made sense now. And yet, she'd stood on that corner in the rain, alone and miserable. She'd taken his umbrella with gratitude, not arrogance. She'd sat in a booth tonight beside his daughter, listening like Lily's stories were worth more than stock reports or corporate board meetings. She never once mentioned any of it. Jesse dropped the phone onto the cushion beside him and rubbed his face. She was kind. She was genuine. And she was so far out of his league he'd need a telescope just to wave at her. But that didn't stop his heart from remembering the way she smiled when she looked at him. The following evening, Jesse was back under a car, socket wrench in hand, trying to distract himself with the familiar rhythm of bolts and brake lines. But his thoughts kept drifting to twinkling lights, soft jazz, the way Isabel leaned in when Lily talked about her dream of building a treehouse with a drawbridge. He didn't know what any of it meant. He was still wiping his hands on a rag when the sound of polished tires crunching against gravel made him glance up. The same black town car rolled to a smooth stop just outside the garage, glinting beneath the last pink smear of daylight. The passenger seat was empty this time. The driver stepped out tall, well-groomed in his late 50s, with silver at his temples, and a posture that made him look military, even in a suit. He removed his cap and walked over to Jesse, with the calm of a man who'd seen a lot and judged little. "Mr. Carter?" he asked, voice smooth but not formal. "That's me," Jesse replied, folding his rag. "Isabel, okay?" "She's fine. Sent me to drop off a thank you gift." He handed Jesse a slim box wrapped in dark green ribbon. Jesse didn't open it, just stared at it like it might detonate. "I told her dinner was more than enough." The driver offered a patient smile. "She doesn't really do half measures." "Yeah," Jesse said, scratching the back of his neck. "I'm starting to get that." They stood in quiet for a moment, the breeze tugging gently at the edges of the day. "You've worked for her a long time?" Jesse asked. "Nearly 7 years," the man replied. "I've driven her to boardrooms, charity galas, investor summits in 3 countries. She's sharp, brilliant, kind, in ways that matter." Jesse nodded, unsure what to say. "But I'll tell you something," the driver added, glancing toward the open bay of the garage. "I've never seen her smile the way she did when your daughter handed her that crayon drawing last night." Jesse blinked. "She held on to it the whole ride home," the man said. "Didn't even check her phone." He turned to leave, but paused at the car door. "She doesn't let many people in, Mr. Carter. That includes me. So if she's letting you in, don't dismiss it too quick." The door shut with a quiet click. The car pulled away, leaving Jesse standing there with grease on his hands and something far heavier on his mind. The takeout boxes still sat on the counter, neatly packed in a sleek navy bag with gold lettering Jesse couldn't bring himself to throw away. He wasn't even sure how they'd ended up with leftovers. Isabel had waved off the menu like a regular and simply asked the waiter to surprise them with what travels well. Now, in their tiny kitchen with the leaky faucet and the buzzing fridge, Jesse and Lily sat across from each other, sharing bites from dishes Jesse couldn't pronounce and wouldn't have dreamed of ordering. There were fancy noodles in some kind of lemony sauce, chicken that tasted like it had been marinated in magic, and a dessert Lily declared was like clouds that melted in your mouth. "This is the best night ever," she said for the third time, cheeks full, legs swinging under her chair. Jesse chuckled, stabbing a fork into a piece of something he couldn't name but didn't want to stop eating. "Better than your birthday?" She paused, thinking, "Okay, second best, but only because my birthday had a bounce house." "Ah, right. The bounce house is hard to beat." Lily leaned forward, her face serious now. "Do you think Miss Isabel has a bounce house?" Jesse raised an eyebrow. "I think Miss Isabel probably has an entire castle that is a bounce house." Lily's eyes widened. "That's it. I'm going to be rich someday, and kind, like her, and I'll buy you a truck that doesn't rattle when it goes over bumps." Jesse smiled, even as something in his chest tightened a little. "That's a pretty good plan, kid." She nodded, content, and reached for another spoonful of whipped something. "You like her, huh?" He blinked. "Who?" Lily rolled her eyes like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "Miss Isabel, you smiled at her a lot, but not like the usual smile. It was like—" she squinted, thinking. "Like a heart smile." Jesse laughed, shaking his head. "You've been watching too many cartoons." But later, after Lily had fallen asleep with chocolate smudged on her chin and her dress still half on, Jesse stood in the quiet kitchen, staring at the gold-lettered bag and feeling the echo of her words. A heart smile. Yeah, that's probably exactly what it was. It was just past noon when Jesse's phone buzzed on the workbench, vibrating against a metal tray of lug nuts and making a sound loud enough to cut through the hum of the garage. He wiped his hands on a shop rag and checked the screen. Isabel Moreau. He let it ring once more before answering, trying not to sound like he'd been waiting. "Hey," he said, casually as he could manage. "Hi, Jesse." Her voice was calm, a little lighter than usual. "Hope I'm not interrupting anything too important." He glanced over at the half-dismantled alternator on the Civic 2 bays over. "Just elbow deep in a car that hates me. What's up?" There was a brief pause on her end, almost like she was smiling. "I need a favor. My dad's old Carth, '67 Mustang I told you about? It won't start. I thought I'd take her for a spin today, but she had other plans. Any chance you could come take a look?" He could have pointed her to a dozen other garages. She probably had a whole fleet of mechanics on call with tools cleaner than most hospital equipment. But she was calling him. Jesse didn't hesitate. "Text me the address." She did. 20 minutes later, he was behind the wheel of his rattling pickup, driving toward a neighborhood that had private gates and wide streets lined with trees that looked imported. The kind of place where silence wasn't just expected, it was designed. Her house, or rather, her estate was all glass and stone, perched on a hill like it had been dropped there by a magazine spread. Still, when Isabel opened the garage door, there was something endearingly human about the way she stood there, jacket thrown on over her dress, hair pulled back, no driver or assistant in sight. "Thanks for coming," she said as he stepped inside, eyes flicking to the old Mustang. "She's got personality, and she's also stubborn as hell." Jesse walked over and popped the hood. "Sounds like someone else I know," she laughed, and the sound bounced warmly off the concrete walls. And in that moment, Jesse didn't care if this was an excuse or not. If she wanted reasons to see him, he'd happily keep showing up. The Mustang's hood stayed propped open, engine exposed like a secret waiting to be told. Jesse worked slowly, fingers tracing wires and checking connections with quiet precision. Isabel hovered nearby, leaning against a tool cabinet with a mug of coffee in both hands, the steam curling toward her face in the coolness of the garage. "I used to sit in the passenger seat when I was little," she said, her voice softer now. "My dad would take the long way home just so we could play our Guess the Car Model game. He always made the world feel smaller, safer." Jessie looked up from under the hood, squinting slightly through the light. "He passed?" She nodded. 2 years ago. Cancer. Fast. Quiet. I didn't even get to say goodbye. Just a voicemail I never deleted." Jessie's hand stilled over the distributor cap. "I'm sorry. That kind of quiet hurts the worst." Isabel took a slow sip from her mug, her eyes distant. "You lost someone too, didn't you?" He didn't answer right away. Just turned a wrench carefully, the clicking sound sharp in the stillness. "My wife," he said finally. 5 years ago. Car accident. Lily was 2. One moment we were planning birthday balloons, the next." He trailed off, exhaling through his nose. "I used to sleep on the couch because our bedroom smelled too much like her shampoo. Eventually, the scent faded. That was almost worse." She didn't speak, just walked closer and handed him the coffee. Jessie took it, surprised by how steady her hands were compared to his. "I don't talk about her much," he added. "Not because I don't want to. Just, not a lot of people get it." "I do," she said gently. For a while the only sound was the soft tap of Jessie's tools and the occasional creak of the Mustang as he shifted weight. But something else filled the space, something quieter and stronger, the comfort of not needing to explain yourself. The strange peace of being seen exactly as you are. When the engine finally turned over with a proud, throaty growl, Isabel smiled, but it wasn't for the car. "Thank you," she said. Jessie looked at her, knowing full well she wasn't talking about the fix. By the end of the week, the whispers had already started. Jessie felt them before he heard them the way. Conversation paused when he walked into the diner. The not-so-subtle glances exchanged between customers at the grocery store. The questions loaded with more curiosity than concern. Small towns didn't need headlines to spark gossip. They just needed something new. And Jessie, apparently, had become exactly that. "Did you hear?" Marla, who ran the flower shop, said a little too loudly from behind the coffee counter at Hank's diner. Jessie Carter had dinner at the Carlton, with some high-end city woman. Said she pulled up in a car so shiny it made Hank's glasses fog up. Hank, pouring syrup over a short stack, grunted. "Wasn't fog, Marla. It was disbelief. That boy's idea of dinner is microwave lasagna and a beer." At the hardware store, Chuck leaned over the counter and asked Jessie straight out, "You dating royalty now, or is this one of those undercover boss situations?" Jessie just laughed it off, as casually as he could. "She's just someone I helped out during the rain, that's all." But he could feel it. The town was circling the idea like a campfire, half in awe, half in suspicion. Isabel wasn't just beautiful. She was different. And in a place where everyone knew everyone's grandmother, a woman like her showing up twice was enough to start stories that wrote themselves. Even Luis and Donnie at the garage wouldn't let it go. "So," Donnie said, wiping his hands on a rag with a smirk, "when's she coming back? Or did she realize we're all just grease monkeys and back out before you could introduce her to the magic of instant ramen?" "She's got her own life," Jessie replied, but even he heard the defensive note in his voice. Luis shot him a look. "You like her?" Jessie didn't answer. He thought about the Mustang's low purr, the shared coffee, the way Isabel's eyes softened when she talked about her dad. He thought about Lily, still drawing pictures of Miss Isabel in crayon at the kitchen table. Yeah, he liked her. But in a town this small, feelings weren't just feelings. They were front-page material whether you wanted them to be or not. It was a Saturday morning when the knock came, 3 sharp raps against the door that carried a tone Jessie hadn't heard in years. He wiped his hands on a dish towel and opened it to find Claire standing on the porch, arms crossed, lips tight, hair pinned in the same no-nonsense bun she always wore. Claire, his late wife's sister, the one who had cried hardest at the funeral, who used to stop by every other weekend with groceries and casseroles, and who eventually had stopped coming altogether. Time didn't heal everything. Some silences just stretched. "Hey," Jesse said, trying for warmth. "Didn't expect to see you." "I was in town visiting a friend," she said, stepping past him without waiting for an invitation. "Figured I should check in." She paused when she saw the sketch. Lily had taped to the wall crayon hearts, stars, and a shaky drawing of 3 stick figures. Jesse, Lily, and a woman with long brown hair labeled Ms. Isabel. Claire's eyebrows lifted. "So, that's her?" Jesse sighed and shut the door. "You want coffee? Are you seeing her?" He didn't answer right away. He poured a cup and handed it to her, fingers brushing briefly. "It's complicated." Claire sat down at the kitchen table, her gaze sharp. "You think Jess would be okay with this? With you whining and dining someone who doesn't know a thing about your life?" Jesse flinched at the name. "Jess." His Jess. "I'm not whining or dining anyone," he muttered. "I helped her out in the rain. She thanked me. That's all." "She's not from here, Jesse. She's not us. People talk." "I know." Claire's expression softened, but only a little. "Look, I'm not trying to be cruel. I loved her too. And it's hard to see you moving on like it's simple." "It's not simple," Jesse said quietly. "It's guilt. Every day. It's putting on a brave face for Lily. It's eating dinner across from an empty chair. You think I don't carry her with me? Every minute?" Claire looked down at her cup. "Then what is this woman to you?" He didn't have an answer. Not one that wouldn't break him. All he knew was, for the first time in a long time, someone had looked at him like he was still more than the worst thing that had ever happened to him. And that, maybe, was reason enough to want more. Even if it scared him. The sun had dipped low, painting the sky in shades of copper and rose, when Jesse pulled up to Isabel's place for the second time that week. She'd texted earlier simple, casual. "Mustang stalling again. Coffee while you check it?" He told himself it was just a car thing. Just a favor. But deep down, he knew it was more. She met him at the garage door, barefoot, wearing jeans and a soft gray sweater that looked far too ordinary for someone with a driver and a guest list full of billionaires. Her hair was loose, waves tumbling over her shoulders like she hadn't bothered taming them for once. "Thanks for coming," she said, her voice a little quieter than usual. Jesse gave her a small smile. "I think that car just likes attention." Isabel smirked, then stepped aside to let him pass. He headed for the Mustang while she poured coffee from a French press on the workbench. A silence settled in between them, not uncomfortable, just full. "Something's different," he said finally, peering under the hood. "You're quiet tonight." She hesitated, fingers curled around her mug. "I've been thinking." Jesse glanced over. Dangerous. That earned a laugh, brief but real. She leaned against the wall beside him. "You know, I was engaged once." The words landed with a soft thud, catching him off guard. His name was Aaron, investment guy. Lived by calendars and quarterly returns. Everyone said we made sentient paper at least. Jesse didn't interrupt. He just waited. "I called it off 6 weeks before the wedding," she continued. "Not because he did anything wrong. He was fine, polished, predictable. But I realized one day I didn't laugh around him, not the way I do with people who really see me." She looked down, as if embarrassed. "Since then, I've kept people at a distance. Safer that way. Less messy. No risk of disappointing anyone, or being disappointed." Jesse set his wrench down slowly. "Sounds lonely." "It is," she said, meeting his eyes. "But safe." He took a step closer, not to invade, just to be near. "You don't have to be safe with me. I don't expect perfect, just real." For a moment, Isabel didn't speak. But something in her face shifted, like a window opening after a long winter. And Jesse, standing there in the fading light, saw her clearly for the first time. Not the CEO. Not the woman in heels and designer coats. just Isabel. And she was more beautiful than ever. Lily's birthday fell on a Saturday, and Jesse had planned to keep it simple: balloons from the corner store, boxed cake mix, a few neighbors, and maybe a second-hand bike if he could find one in decent shape. That was their rhythm. Small, but meaningful. Love, wrapped in duct tape and dollar store streamers. But Isabel had other plans. It started with a single envelope on the kitchen counter that morning, cream-colored, sealed with a tiny gold sticker. Lily opened it with cautious fingers, while Jesse watched from the sink, half dreading what he'd agreed to when Isabel asked for a little birthday favor. Inside was a hand-drawn map, complete with swirls and arrows and sparkly stickers, ending in a big red X that said, "Follow me to the best birthday ever." Lily gasped. "Dad, is this for me?" He nodded, already nervous. "Looks like it." They followed the map to the town's public garden, normally quiet, dusty, and a little overgrown, but today it looked like something out of a dream. There were picnic tables dressed in soft pastel linens, rows of handmade paper flowers tied to string, and a banner overhead that read, "Happy Birthday, Lily," in big, bold letters shaped like stars. A storyteller sat under a tree with a circle of kids, weaving tales with voices and puppets. A face painter decorated cheeks with butterflies and lightning bolts. And at the center of it all, a cake that defied logic: layers of pink and blue and yellow, frosted with clouds and tiny sugar lilies, each petal crafted with impossible care. Isabel stood near the edge of it all, watching from a quiet distance in a simple sundress and sneakers, her hair pulled back with a soft ribbon. She wasn't giving orders or demanding attention, just smiling like the whole thing had nothing to do with her. Jesse walked over, stunned. "You did all this?" She shrugged. "With help. And a lot of Pinterest." He looked around, overwhelmed. "You didn't have to." "I know," she said. "But I wanted to." Later, when Lily blew out her candles surrounded by friends and laughter, she turned to Jesse with frosting on her nose and whispered, "This is better than a bounce house." And Jesse, standing beside Isabel with the sound of his daughter's joy wrapping around them like sunlight, realized something he hadn't dared before. This was what it felt like to let someone in. The day after the party, the house felt quieter than usual. The paper stars still hung across Lily's bedroom doorway, and her new art supplies were spread out like treasure on the living room floor. Jesse sat at the kitchen table nursing his second cup of coffee, trying to process the magic of yesterday. It still didn't feel real. Lily was humming to herself in the other room, drawing something she called a friendship spaceship, with Isabel and Jesse in the cockpit. Jesse smiled, shaking his head, just as his phone buzzed. "Isabel, are you free this afternoon? There's something I'd like to talk to you about." By 2 o'clock, Jesse was parked outside Isabel's downtown office building. It was everything he expected: sleek glass, quiet efficiency, and the smell of expensive decisions in the air. But Isabel met him in the lobby, dressed down in jeans and a blazer, coffee in one hand, and that same soft smile that made him feel like maybe he wasn't entirely out of place here. They walked to a quiet conference room overlooking the city. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, making the polished table glow. "I didn't bring you here to scare you," she said, sitting across from him. "This isn't a boardroom ambush." Jesse raised a brow. "Should I be scared?" "That depends." She slid a folder across the table. Inside were blueprints, charts, and a brief summary with a bold heading, "Community Integration Auto Project, East Briar Division." "I'm launching a new initiative," Isabel said. "Smaller builds, community-based innovation, hybrid designs built by locals, for locals. I need someone to oversee operations, someone who understands people as well as machines." He blinked at the paperwork. "You want me to run this?" She nodded. "You've got the experience, the instincts, and the trust of your town. Plus, I don't know anyone else who'd lend a stranger an umbrella in the pouring rain." Jesse leaned back, stunned. The offer came with real pay, benefits, structure a future. "Isabel, this is a lot." "I know," she said softly. "But so are you." He didn't answer right away, but in his chest, something stirred hope, maybe. or the terrifying thrill of change finally within reach. Jesse sat on the back steps of his house, elbows resting on his knees, the afternoon sun filtering through the worn-out screen door behind him. The neighborhood buzzed quietly around him, distant lawnmowers, kids riding bikes, someone grilling 2 houses down. It was the soundtrack of his everyday, the familiar hum of a life built in pieces. The folder Isabel had given him sat on his lap, unopened since he brought it home. He didn't need to read it again. He'd memorized every detail last night: the numbers, the perks, the title, project manager, competitive salary, full benefits, training program for local hires. It was the kind of offer that could change everything, especially for Lily. But every time he thought about accepting, something pulled him back. This was their home. The town that watched him raise a baby after Jess died, that let Lily grow up with scraped knees and neighbor-made birthday cakes. The garage down the street had been his second home, the same place his dad once worked before his hands gave out. Every crack in the sidewalk felt like a memory. Every grocery store cashier knew his name. Inside, Lily sat cross-legged at the kitchen table, drawing spaceships again. "If I was the captain," she told her teddy bear, "I'd fly to all the places with good pancakes." Jesse smiled despite the weight in his chest. She didn't know yet. He hadn't told her about the offer, about what it might mean. He stood up, walked inside, and leaned against the door frame. "Hey kid," he said, "what if I got a new job?" Lily looked up, wide-eyed. "Like, fixing rocket ships?" He chuckled. "Not quite. Just bigger cars, better pay. Might mean moving to a different part of town, maybe even a different town." She was quiet for a moment, then shrugged. "As long as we're together, I don't care." Simple, honest, and somehow heavier than anything Jesse had read in that folder. He knew the job could give Lily more. More opportunity, more stability. But what if it took something too? The roots, the rhythms, the parts of their life that didn't show up on a paycheck. He didn't have an answer yet. Just a question that wouldn't let go. How do you move forward when your past still fits like home? The city was softer at night. From Isabel's balcony, the skyline glittered in quiet conversation with the stars, and the hum of traffic below faded into something almost peaceful. Jesse stood near the railing, a mug of coffee warming his hands, unsure how he'd ended up in a place like this, half a world away from oil-stained garage floors and Friday night meatloaf. Isabel joined him, barefoot, a blanket wrapped loosely around her shoulders, and a second mug in her hand. No makeup, no designer, anything. Just her. And for once, the silence between them didn't feel awkward. It felt earned. "Thanks for coming," she said softly, leaning her forearms on the railing beside him. "You say that like I needed convincing." She smiled. "You're not exactly easy to read." Jesse took a sip of coffee, dark and rich. "That's funny. You're probably the first person to ever say that. I've been told I'm as readable as a coloring book." "Not to me," she said. "You don't say things unless you mean them." He glanced over at her, the city lights casting a glow across her face. "That a good thing or a bad thing?" "I think it's rare." They stood like that for a while, watching the city blink below them. He told her about the time Lily built a security system out of tin cans and yarn for their mailbox. She told him about the night she nearly walked away from her company after a brutal board meeting that left her questioning everything. "I thought if I failed at something I built from the ground up." "What did that say about me?" she said. "What'd you do?" "I got in my car and drove until I hit a place with no cell service. I sat on a dock for hours." She paused, then smiled. "I skipped a conference in Zurich. Big scandal." He laughed, shaking his head. "I've never been out of state, let alone to Zurich." She looked at him then, really looked. "You're not small, Jesse. Don't let the map convince you otherwise." The words settled into him, quiet but deep. He didn't answer, didn't need to, not with the way their shoulders brushed. Not with the way their silence held meaning. No lavish dinners tonight, no cameras. Just coffee, stars, and something between them that hadn't been named but was already real. It started with a glance, too long at the grocery store. Then, a hushed whisper outside the post office. By the time Jesse walked into the diner one morning and saw the sudden shift in conversation, the way people looked up, then quickly looked away, he knew something had changed. The warmth that usually met him, the easy familiarity of small-town mornings, felt thinner now. Like everyone had questions, but no one wanted to ask them out loud. Marla, who used to hand Lily free cookies every Tuesday, just gave him a tight smile as she poured his coffee. "Big city woman still around?" she asked, too sweet to be innocent. Jesse stirred his cup slowly. "She's a friend." Marla raised an eyebrow. "Sure, and I'm just a waitress." He didn't bite, didn't explain. But the weight of their stares lingered long after he left his usual tip on the counter and stepped back out into the morning sun. At the same time, miles away in a polished boardroom with panoramic city views, Isabel stared at her phone. A headline sat at the top of her newsfeed like a slap across the face. "Heiress of horsepower. Isabel Moreau. Spotted with mystery mechanic." It wasn't the first article. And it wouldn't be the last. Grainy photos of them walking through the park after Lily's birthday. Blurry zoom-ins from the restaurant. Some outlet had even tracked down Jesse's full name and posted it next to an outdated photo from the auto shop's Yelp page. The comments were the worst. "He's clearly using her. This won't last. She'll come to her senses." Gold digger in reverse? Her assistant knocked lightly on the office door. "PR team wants to know if you'd like to make a statement." Isabel stared out the window. "About what? That I had dinner with a good man?" "They want to manage optics." She let out a quiet breath. "Tell them to manage something else." Back in East Briar, Jesse pulled into his driveway and saw Lily playing hopscotch with sidewalk chalk, oblivious to whispers and headlines. He watched her for a long moment, then glanced at his phone, where Isabel had sent only one message. "If you're feeling the weight, I am too." He stared at it, thumb hovering over the screen. It wasn't just gossip anymore. It was pressure. It was judgment. And suddenly, kindness didn't feel quite as simple as it used to. The days stretched longer after that. Messages between them slowed. The easy rhythm they'd found, coffee on balconies, quiet dinners, late-night phone calls, faded like the tail end of a song. Jesse told himself she was busy. Meetings, travel, responsibilities far beyond his garage and Lily's bedtime stories. But deep down, he felt it. She was pulling away. When she finally called, her voice sounded careful, like someone choosing every word with a scalpel instead of a heart. "I'm sorry I haven't reached out," she said. Jesse sat on the edge of his bed, watching the rain streak down the window. "You don't owe me anything." "I owe you honesty," she replied. "And the truth is, this has gotten harder than I thought it would." He stayed silent, letting her fill the space. "I didn't expect to care this much," she said quietly. "But I do, and that means I'm starting to think about everything that could go wrong. The media, my world, the pressure. It's not fair to you, or to Lily." Jesse swallowed hard. "So what are you saying?" "I don't know," she admitted. "Maybe that I'm scared, that I don't want to hurt you, that I'm already doing it just by being who I am." Outside, the rain tapped gently against the glass, like it was trying to break the silence between them. After the call ended, Jesse sat there for a long time, phone face down on the mattress beside him. His reflection in the darkened window looked unfamiliar, someone caught between what he wanted and what he couldn't quite hold on to. In the kitchen, Lily was coloring, her brow furrowed in concentration. She looked up and smiled when he walked in, holding up a drawing of 3 stick figures again, this time with a broken heart scribbled above their heads. Jesse's chest tightened. He crouched beside her and pulled her close. Maybe he'd been fooling himself, thinking he could belong in her world without changing who he was. Thinking love could outrun reality. Because no matter how many times he replayed her words, they all came down to the same thing. She was stepping back, and he didn't know how to stop her. It was a quiet Sunday morning. The kind Jessie used to cherish. No rush, no alarms, just the smell of pancakes in the skillet and Lily humming off-key to whatever cartoon theme was stuck in her head. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, catching the dust in soft gold streaks as it warmed the cracked linoleum floor. Jessie flipped a pancake with one hand and took a sip of lukewarm coffee with the other. Across the table, Lily sat barefoot, swinging her legs beneath her chair, syrup already on her chin. "Dad?" she asked, licking her fork. "Yeah, bug?" She looked at him with that serious expression she got when she was trying to figure out something, brows pinched, mouth slightly open, like she was working through a puzzle only her heart could solve. "Is Isabel going to be my new mommy?" The fork slipped from his hand and clattered onto the counter. For a second he couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe, even. Lily didn't notice. She was busy adding more syrup to her plate, waiting patiently for an answer like she'd just asked what time the movie started. Jessie crouched beside her chair, gently brushing a sticky strand of hair from her cheek. "Why do you ask that?" Lily shrugged. "You smile when you talk about her. And she made me a birthday party. And she hugs me soft, like how Mom used to." Her voice dropped to a whisper on that last word, like it was fragile, like even saying it too loudly might break something. Jessie felt the ache twist deep. He should have seen it coming, the drawings. The way Lily asked when Isabel would visit again, how she'd saved the crayon-colored thank you card they never got to deliver. "I don't know, sweetheart," he said gently, his voice thick. "She's special, but sometimes grown-ups don't always know where things are going." Lily nodded, solemn. "Okay, I just thought maybe we could all be a team." Jessie pulled her into a hug, holding her tight. So did he. But love, he was learning, wasn't always about what you felt. Sometimes it was about what you feared. The message came late, too late for it to be casual. Jessie found it after putting Lily to bed, her arms wrapped tight around her stuffed fox, her soft breathing filling the room with peace he couldn't quite feel himself. He sat on the edge of the couch, reading the words over and over, hoping they might rearrange themselves into something easier. "I'm leaving for Europe, a new partnership in Munich. Could be a few months, maybe more. I wanted to tell you before it hits the press. I'll call soon. Isabel." There was no "I'll miss you," no "wish you were coming with me." Just facts, polished and polite. He stared at the screen, heart numb, thumb hovering over the keyboard with nothing to say. What could he say? That Lily had asked if she was going to be her new mommy? That he still had her coffee mug in the sink, untouched? That every time his phone buzzed, he'd hoped it was her changing her mind? The next afternoon, he drove out to the hill above town, where cell signal was spotty and the world felt quieter. Isabel had always said she liked the view up here, the way the town looked small but whole, tucked into the earth like it belonged there. He stood by the fence and waited. She arrived in the same black town car, but this time there was no driver. She stepped out slowly, hair pulled back in a simple knot, wearing flats and a long coat that fluttered in the wind. "Hey," she said. "Hey," Jessie replied. They stood in silence for a moment. The kind that says everything both of them are too afraid to say. "I didn't want to leave without seeing you," she said at last. "But you're still leaving," he replied, not bitter, just honest. "I have to," she said. "This deal, it's important. I've worked years to get to this point." He nodded. "I know." She looked at him then, eyes shining but dry. "It's not forever." Jessie didn't flinch. "But it's not forever, either." A beat passed. She reached for his hand, gripped it tightly. "You've given me more in a few weeks than most people have in a lifetime. And you made my daughter believe in magic again." They stood like that until the wind grew colder. Then she let go, slipped back into the car, and drove away. He stayed until the taillights disappeared. Temporary, she'd said. But Jessie had a feeling some goodbyes echo louder than others. The rain came back like an old memory slow at first, then steady, painting the streets of East Briar in familiar shades of gray. It was the kind of rain Jessie had once called car-fixing, weather-moody, quiet, the perfect excuse to hunker down with a mug of coffee and an engine that needed love. But now, the sound of it drumming on the roof just felt hollow. 1 year. That's how long it had been since Isabel left. Since she hugged Lily goodbye and promised to send postcards. Since she stood on the hilltop and told Jesse it wasn't forever. She kept her word in the ways she could. Letters came from Paris, Rome, and Munich. Packages arrived with little notebooks in foreign languages, chocolate shaped like cars. Even a tiny Eiffel Tower keychain Lily hung on her backpack like a badge of hope. But eventually, the calls faded. The messages slowed. Work always had a way of getting in the way of good intentions. And Jesse? He never wrote back as often as he wanted to. Sometimes it felt too hard to find the words. Other times, it felt harder to admit that he still waited for her name to light up his screen. Lily had grown taller, sharper her baby face, softening into something more curious, more watchful. She didn't ask about Isabel anymore, not directly, but she still drew pictures with 3 people in them, still left an extra chair empty at the dinner table sometimes, without saying why. Jesse kept busy. The shop needed him. The town needed him. He helped fix Mrs. Donnelly's heater when it died, taught Donnie how to rebuild a carburetor without cussing. He laughed at barstool jokes and shook off questions with a grin. But at night, when the lights were off and the rain tapped against the window like it was checking in, the quiet had a different weight. Because no one asked how he was doing anymore. They just assumed he was over it, that he had moved on. But Jesse knew better. Some seasons come back without warning, and some people leave behind a space that even time doesn't know how to fill. The envelope stood out the moment Jesse opened the mailbox. Among the usual clutter of bills, flyers, and junk there it was, heavy paper, cream-colored with a faint gold trim. His name was written in ink, not printed. And below it, in smaller, careful handwriting, Lily. He paused on the porch, rain pattering on the tin awning above him, the envelope cool and stiff in his hands. For a long time, he didn't open it, just stared, as if it might vanish if he blinked. Inside the house, Lily was on the couch, half buried in a blanket, sketching planets in her notebook. Jesse stepped in, dripping slightly, and handed her the envelope. Her eyes lit up as she read their names. "Is it from her?" Jesse nodded once. Lily tore it open with gentle fingers, more reverent than excited. She pulled out a folded card, elegant but simple. At the top, embossed in gold, was the name of the event. The Heart Engine Initiative, Innovating for Families. Empowering Small Towns. Below was the invitation, addressed to both of them. You are warmly invited to attend the launch of a new community-based foundation created to fund educational, vocational, and local business programs in underserved regions across the country. It began with a man, an umbrella, and a small-town mechanic who reminded me what matters most. I'd be honored if you'd both be there. Isabel Moreau. Jesse read the words again and again. His chest felt too tight for something so simple. Lily looked up at him, eyes wide. She remembered us. He swallowed hard. She always did. The event was only a week away, hosted at a small art museum on the edge of the city, not far from where they'd had their first dinner together. A black tie affair, the kind Jesse used to joke about on TV. But somehow, it felt different this time. Less about fancy clothes. More about unfinished stories. Lily touched the bottom of the card. "Are we going?" Jesse didn't answer right away, but he looked at her hopeful, beaming, and realized he already knew. Some invitations were more than formalities. They were bridges, and maybe it was time to cross one. The city glowed differently at night, sharper, faster, like it was holding its breath between light and shadow. Jesse hadn't been back in almost a year, not since that night on the balcony. But now he was here again, hand in hand with Lily, both of them dressed a little nicer than usual and feeling a little more out of place than they let on. She wore a navy dress with tiny silver stars scattered across the skirt. He wore the same blazer Isabel's stylist once brought to his house, freshly pressed, and maybe a little snug in the shoulders now. Lily clutched the invitation like a compass, as if it might guide them through the towering museum doors. The Heart Engine Initiative launch was nothing short of dazzling. Glass chandeliers sparkled overhead, reflecting across marble floors and polished chrome sculptures. Waiters floated by with trays of delicate hors d'oeuvres Jessie couldn't name, and strings of quiet jazz wove through the low hum of conversation. But Jessie wasn't listening to the room. He was scanning it. And then there she was. Isabel stood at the far end of the hall, framed by a simple podium and a large banner bearing the foundation's name. Her hair was swept back, her dress understated but elegant. Her eyes found his almost instantly. No cameras, no crowd. Just that look, soft, surprised, maybe even relieved. He gave her a small nod. She gave him a smile that didn't belong to the woman everyone else here thought they knew. The speech began not long after. A soft bell rang, the chatter faded, and Isabel stepped forward beneath the warm spotlight. "I've spent most of my life in rooms like this," she began, her voice steady. "Boardrooms, galas, strategy meetings. But the heart of this project started somewhere much smaller." She paused. "It started on a rainy morning, in a quiet town, with a man who gave me his only umbrella without knowing my name, and a little girl who showed me more courage and joy than some people find in a lifetime." Murmurs moved through the crowd. Jessie felt Lily squeeze his hand. "This foundation isn't just about technology or business," Isabel continued. "It's about people, kindness, believing that no matter where you come from, you have something worth building, something worth sharing." The applause was polite, controlled, but Jessie heard more than words. He heard her saying, "I remember." He heard her saying, "You mattered." He heard her saying, "Come back." And for the first time in a long while, he wondered if maybe this wasn't the end of something. Maybe it was the beginning. The gallery's private corridor hummed with muted voices and soft footsteps, but it all blurred as Jessie followed the usher backstage. Lily had wandered off with a museum staffer to look at an interactive art piece after extracting a promise that Jessie wouldn't leave without her. He found Isabel standing alone near a tall window, framed by sheer curtains and the golden glow of city lights. Her speech papers were tucked under her arm, but her posture, shoulders slightly tense, hands fidgeting with her bracelet, said more than she probably wanted it to. She turned at the sound of his footsteps. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said softly. Jessie stopped a few feet away. "Neither was I." For a moment, neither of them moved. The buzz of the event on the other side of the wall felt miles away. "You look the same," she said, a small smile tugging at her lips. Jessie raised an eyebrow. "That sounds dangerously close to you. Still clean up well." She laughed, just a little. "You always did know how to lower the temperature." He slipped his hands into his pockets, his voice quieter now. "Why didn't you call?" Isabel's smile faded. She looked down at her shoes, then back up at him. "Because I was afraid." "Of what?" "Of messing up something good. Of dragging you and Lily into my mess of a world. Of seeing you two grow resentful bit by bit every time a headline hit or I had to cancel a visit." Jessie didn't speak. "Not yet." "I told myself disappearing was better than disappointing you," she continued, her voice breaking slightly. "But I thought about you, both of you, every day. I carried you with me in every city, every boardroom. And not calling? That was the biggest mistake I've made in years." The confession hung there, raw and trembling. "I just didn't want to be the reason you stayed stuck," she whispered. Jessie stepped closer. "You weren't holding us back. You were the first thing in a long time that made us believe we could move forward." Her eyes met his, hopeful, scared, open. It wasn't a grand declaration, not a kiss in the rain, but it was truth. And it was enough. The event had begun to wind down by the time Jessie found Lily, sitting cross-legged beneath a large glass sculpture that shimmered like frozen light. She was scribbling something on the back of a napkin with a pink gel pen, her shoes kicked off, her expression deep in concentration. When she spotted Isabel approaching behind Jessie, Her eyes lit up not with surprise, but with something calmer, like she'd been waiting for this all along. "Hey, Bug," Jessie said gently. "Guess who's here?" Lily turned the napkin around without a word. On it, she'd drawn 3 figures sitting at a round table alone with wild hair, clearly Jessie. One with a long dress and a smile, Isabel, and a smaller one in the middle, holding hands with both of them. Above it, in bold letters, she'd written, "Dinner again, please." Isabel knelt down beside her. "Did you draw this for me?" Lily nodded. "I've been drawing it every week." "Well, almost. Some were messier," Isabel swallowed, brushing her hair behind her ear. "Why dinner?" "Because that was the best day," Lily said simply. We laughed. "You made Dad wear fancy shoes, and you let me have dessert first." Isabel chuckled softly, but her eyes brimmed with something far heavier. "I kept wishing," Lily continued. "Every night before bed, I'd close my eyes and think real hard, please, let us all have dinner together again, not the fancy kind, just us." Isabel looked at Jessie, who was watching them quietly, arms crossed, holding the envelope from earlier like it was still delivering its message. "I missed you, Lily," Isabel said gently. "More than I can explain." "Then don't explain," Lily said. "Just come over. Dad makes the best grilled cheese. We could even eat on the couch. We don't care if your world's messy." The words were small, simple, childlike in tone, but wise in a way Jessie couldn't ignore. Isabel leaned in and pulled Lily into a hug, one hand gently pressed to the back of her head. "I'd like that," she whispered. More than anything. In that moment, it didn't matter who had what or where they'd been. All that mattered was the wish of a little girl who knew exactly what love looked like, and who was brave enough to ask for it back. The museum was nearly empty now, the echo of clinking glasses and quiet conversations replaced by silence and the soft shuffle of staff packing up linens and folding chairs. Outside, the city glowed through the tall windows, blurred by the soft smear of rain against the glass, just like the night they'd first met. Jessie and Isabel stood alone near the display of architectural models in the West Wing, the world finally giving them space. Lily had fallen asleep in the town car, curled up in the back seat with her head on a borrowed coat. Jessie had tucked her in gently before returning inside. He looked at Isabel now, really looked at her, not the CEO, not the press statement, not the woman too busy to call, just Isabel. The one who once stood in the rain and took an old umbrella like it was a treasure. The one who made grilled cheese sound like a promise when Lily spoke about her. "I should have told you this a long time ago," Jessie began, his voice low, steady. "Back when we had that first dinner, I thought you were just being kind, thanking me for a good deed. I didn't expect anything more." She tilted her head slightly, eyes soft. "Neither did I. But it wasn't just a night out," he continued. "It was the first time I'd felt like more than a dad trying to stay afloat. More than a man patching together a life with duct tape and old tools. You made me feel seen." He paused, swallowing. "You gave me a glimpse of something I didn't think I could have anymore. Not since Jess passed. Not in this town. Not for someone like me." "What did I give you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Hope," Jessie said. "You gave me hope, that there's more ahead, that it's okay to want something again. Someone, a real future." Isabel stepped forward, slowly, like she didn't want to break the moment. "You were never just anything, Jessie. You've been carrying the weight of the world on your back, and somehow still managed to make everyone around you feel lighter." They stood in the stillness, a breath away from everything unspoken. "I'm here now," she said, "not for a moment, for as long as you'll let me be." He didn't need to say yes. The look in his eyes, the slight nod, the way he reached for her hand, that was his answer. And this time, neither of them walked away. The rain came softly at first, like a memory, easing its way back into the present. Jessie heard it before he saw it, the gentle tapping on the museum's glass awning, the hush that settled over the city when the skies turned silver. He stood just outside the grand doors, the weight of the evening settling in his chest in the best possible way. The world felt quieter now, slower. Like for once, it wasn't rushing past him. Isabel stepped out beside him a moment later, her heels clicking softly against the stone, her hair slightly tousled from the night's long hours. She paused when she saw the drizzle, then reached into her coat pocket and pulled out something familiar. An umbrella. Not just any umbrella, his umbrella. Or at least, it used to be. The same old handle, still wrapped in duct tape, though now with a new canopy deep navy with faint gold stitching at the edges. Clean. Repaired. Loved. Jessie stared at it with a surprised laugh. "You kept it?" She smiled, opening it with a satisfying click. "You gave it to me when I needed it. I figured one day I'd return the favor." She held it over him, stepping in close, her free hand slipping easily into his. The rain brushed against the edges, soft and steady, as they stood together beneath its shelter. "It suits you," he said, glancing up. "I made a few upgrades," she replied with a grin. "But I left the duct tape. Felt right." They began walking slowly toward the waiting car. The city blurred around them, soft through the curtain of rain, but the world beneath the umbrella felt warm and real. "You know," Jessie said, his tone teasing, "I was starting to think I'd never see that umbrella again." "Well," Isabel said, leaning into him, "some things are worth holding on to." He squeezed her hand, and she looked up at him through the soft drizzle. And this time, he didn't feel like he was chasing something out of reach. He was already home. The rain was steady now, blanketing East Briar in a soft, rhythmic hush that wrapped the streets in calm. Puddles shimmered beneath the dim glow of porch lights, and the scent of wet pavement mixed with fresh-cut grass and distant chimney smoke. Jessie stood at the edge of the sidewalk, umbrella in hand, but this time he wasn't alone beneath it. On his right, Isabel matched his stride, her heels, long forgotten in favor of sneakers she'd pulled from her car. On his left, Lily held both their hands, her pink rain boots splashing with every step, her laughter bright and unfiltered as she jumped through every puddle she could find. They walked the long way home. Not because they had to, because they could. No one said much. They didn't need to. The silence between them wasn't empty anymore. It was full of knowing glances, shared warmth, and the quiet miracle of having found one another in the most ordinary of ways. At the corner, they passed the spot where it had all begun. The sidewalk where Isabel once stood, soaked and shivering, waiting for a ride that never came. Jessie paused for a second, looking down at the spot like it was a landmark, a place worthy of a plaque. Isabel noticed. "Funny how one moment can change everything." Jessie nodded. "One umbrella." "One heart," Lily added, beaming. They kept walking, the three of them close, rain tapping gently on the umbrella above them. Lily humming some made-up tune as they turned onto their street. Home looked the same. The crooked mailbox. The porch Jessie had patched up with old wood and love. The flickering porch light. But everything felt different. The front door creaked open, and Lily darted inside, kicking off her boots and racing to dig through her bookshelf for a bedtime story. Jessie watched her, then turned to Isabel, who was still standing just outside the doorway, the umbrella now folded at her side. "Sure, you're ready for this?" he asked, only half teasing. She stepped forward, leaned up, and kissed him lightly. "Certainly." "I've never been more sure of anything," she whispered. And, as they stepped inside together, into a home that no longer felt like just his, the storm outside didn't matter, because inside, they had found something no forecast could predict. Not strangers, not from different worlds. A family found by fate, held together by choice.